Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Terry Ray, who's VP of Services at 3G TMS. And today we're going to talk about keys to a successful TMS implementation. Now, TMS systems have been around for a long time, and companies have been implementing TMS solutions for a long time. But not every TMS implementation goes as smoothly as possible, and not all of them deliver the value that companies expect. So, what are some of the pitfalls to avoid? What are some of the lessons learned, from companies that do it right and continue to achieve ongoing benefits? Well, that's some of the questions we're going to address today here with Terry, who's kind of on the front lines of doing this day in and day out, and has got a wealth of experience in this area. So, Terry, thanks for making the time to be with us today.
Oh, fantastic, Adrian. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and sort of share some of the lessons learned and the battle scars from, like you said, being on the front lines for a long time.
Great. So, Terry, your first time guest here on Talking Logistics. Like I always like to do whenever we bring someone new on, is just to, before we dive into the topic, it's kind of, get a little bit of an understanding of how and why you got involved in this industry to begin with. So,
Sure.
why don't we start there? Briefly just tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at 3G TMS.
Yeah, sure. So initially, my first job out of college was with another non-logistics company doing technical stuff, where I sort of learned the ins and outs of SQL development. I was doing that during the IT crash of the early 2000s. I got the opportunity to look for another career path. Started off with Red Prairie, and that was really my first foray into the logistics world, if you will. And I immediately was very intrigued by it. It's one thing to be working with computers and doing abstract things. It's another, which I found very interesting and rewarding, to be able to be doing stuff with computers and software and actually be able to see the results, in real life, to be driving down the road and look at a truck and know what's all the things that go on behind that, to walk into, like a Sam's Club or a BJ's and see all the racks and everything, and have a newfound appreciation for everything that goes on there. So again, started off at Red Prairie, moved into TMS implementations. After that, then became sort of a group leader with Red Prairie TMS services, then was rolled into the JDA world during the Red Prairie JDA merger, then have moved over to 3G a couple of years ago. And as you said, right now I'm VP of Implementation Services, so I run the team of, I think we're up to now around 20 people, between technical folks and implementation folks. So that's sort of my world, like you said. I'm, managing those folks and all the projects and implementations that they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Yeah, I love the the kind of that experience in terms of working on something and then being able to kind of relate to it in the real world.
Yep.
I mean, I know I always tell folks, I started my career in semiconductors and all that, but once I got involved with logistics, you can't help but walk into a supermarket or see trucks on the road and kind of be thinking about all the logistics and supply chain processes that are involved. So it does make it kind of neat to see kind of logistics and supply chain in action in the world around you. So let's get into the topic now.
Sure.
Like I said in my opening remarks, companies have been implementing transportation management systems for almost 3 decades now, when you look at how long the market's been around. So why do we still need to have this conversation today about how to successfully implement the TMS?
Right. So, first, just sort of, a little background, of why we're even having this discussion. So like you said, TMS implementations, they're not always the easiest things. There's a lot of challenges that go on behind the scenes and, actually on the, the day-to-day implementation paths and activities. So just, again, sort of a little background, wrote down some things, sort of some highlights. One of the reasons that, things that makes them difficult is they involve multiple people, multiple groups, different roles, and going through the implementation process can sort of bring to light some of those interdependencies that may have not been known to the individual people or individual groups prior to that. So it's important to get that sort of, understanding. And when all those people come together as part of, like an implementation kickoff, that's one of the things that can be made difficult. The ops people suddenly find out, things that were happening from an IT perspective and an integration perspective that they weren't aware of, or people thought one thing was happening, but actually another is happening. WMSs, financial systems, you get all those differing people with their differing histories and understandings brought together. And it's sort of, we'd like to get it to be a melting pot and a collaborative effort, but at least initially there's a lot of discovery and clearing up of maybe some misconceptions. So one of the keys with that is making sure that you have the right people involved. However, on the flip side, one thing to be cognizant of is don't bring the entire company into the conversation. I think, right, make sure you have the right people that are needed, but you don't need typically 50 people in a discovery session all talking about everything. That can sort of slow some of the discussion down. Another issue that often comes up is you have systems and integrations that are in place, but the people who originally did those are no longer around and nobody remembers what happened or why they were done. Why did we set up the integration with our WMS this way? Why are we getting the data, from our ERP in these fields and not the other? How are these data fields getting pieced together that are going to ultimately come into the TMS? So there, again, a lot of unknown, because, it could have been, years, and people who were, like I said, who were there are now gone. Change, and then just get into a little bit more of the people's side of the thing. Change is hard. You're not just changing a piece of software that's being used. And when you're going through that change, people can have the feeling that, again, it's not that I just have to use a different piece of software. It's how is my job going to change, right? And it's not necessarily that people are afraid of losing their job. Which, there is some of that, but that's often not the case. It's I'm going from a job where I am the expert and I know what I'm doing and I know how to operate the software, and I've been doing it this way for a year, and now I'm going to move to a new thing where I am no longer the expert. There's a lot of unknown. I'm afraid I won't know how to do my job as well, and that sort of thing. So those, from a people's perspective, that's one, often a big thing that we have to deal with, just from, the people who are on the front lines actually going to be using the software. Another thing sort of along that line is there's often a lot of tribal knowledge that people have in their heads. And, frankly, there are some times where it's hard to get that out of people, again, because they just have either for one reason or another, they either don't really realize what's in their head. They just sort of, oh, well, I know that. They don't want to give it up, again, for fear of, losing some kind of control on their job. Or it's just, frankly, it's not documented. I know that Bob does something, but I don't know what he does or why he does that. And it's hard when you're doing an implementation and trying to get the software to, optimize and, save time and money to get all those pieces of information, out in the open and shared so that the proper decisions can be made. I guess probably the final one, there can be some, misunderstandings or misaligned goals between different groups of what the reason is that we're going with, this particular TMS. IT may have one goal of, hey, great, we have, this new system, we can redo our integrations, right? Because we've got some old stuff laying around that we want to redo. Ops may have, their set of goals. Well, great. I want to be able to do some new things with my job, not realizing that, often doing new things requires integration changes. Well, IT doesn't want to, may not want to do a bunch of new integration work in order to support those types of things. So it's important to get on the same page, I say from the beginning. And to me, that the beginning is often, during the sales cycle, not at the start of implementation. So, again, those are just sort of some of the challenges, and as we, we'll move into some, things of what that looks like in order for success criteria. One of my coworkers, a lot smarter than me, likes to say, software will only get you so far. It's, the people and the ability to implement that will actually get you, to the finish line or where you ultimately want to be from a, a ROI perspective.
Yeah, no, a lot of great food for thought there, and everything you highlighted are things that I see as well when I talk to companies around this area. As a way to paraphrase or summarize, I mean, it sounds like really you can really start heading down the wrong path, if you will, or down the path of difficulty and failure, really right from the very beginning, before you even get started, if you really don't have if you really don't understand what your baseline is. It sounds like, understanding, where are we today from a transportation standpoint, and how does it interrelate with the other processes, not only from a workflow standpoint, but even from a technology standpoint, right?
Yep.
And then not having the right stakeholders or voices in the room, right, to have that initial conversation, to understand, what the goals and objectives are, what are we trying to achieve, and maybe understand where the gaps are, and try to understand how to best work together to, close those gaps.
Right. Yep.
So let me, and I think you already addressed some of these. I mean, if you had to, distill it down to kind of a key challenge or obstacle that, is probably the most common or that could derail a TMS implementation. I mean, if you had to pick one, what would it be?
So it's, like you said, it's really hard to pick one. I've got a couple just that I'll, touch on it, at a high level. And, I'm not going to, during this talk, my goal isn't to highlight a particular implementation methodology. One is better than the other. I've been involved with all kinds of methodologies and, ways of implementing. They can all be successful, and they all have their place in, the right environment. They can all succeed. Again, sort of what I mentioned before, I want to talk more about, what goes on behind with either any of those types of methodologies, and it's sort of the people and what happens behind the scenes. So I say, one key is to be flexible. Expect the unexpected. Things are always going to arise, but have a good plan and a good open communication about what you're going to do and how you're going to address those challenges. This isn't necessarily about changing scope, but looking and agreeing, like we said before, on what's the ultimate goal and how are we going to get around those challenges in order to, achieve our ultimately agreed upon goal. In terms of goals, be realistic about your goals. If you want to implement, a full function TMS that, from planning to full optimization, pooling, all the financials, integrating with the WMS, an ERP, a financial system, carrier EDI, be realistic about what that level of effort is going to look like, the complexities, all the different people and groups that are going to need to be involved in that type of a implementation. And, sort of expect that level of effort and commitment that's going to be needed. And more along, also to add on to the expectations part, don't look at a TMS as your silver bullet to solve a bunch of other problems within your supply chain. There are only so many things that TMS implementation, no matter how great the software is and how great the project team is, it can only affect so much. TMS can't fix all your problems in your warehouse. It can't fix all the problems in your, your procurement or your financial process. So again, just sort of being realistic about the expectations of the project, going into it. I'd say be prepared. Like I said before, for me, that starts during the sales cycle. Everybody should be on board and sort of understand what's the reason and what's the goal, what's the value prop of why we're doing this. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it with this piece of software? And be aligned, again, throughout the organization on, all the different parties need to understand. Yes, everybody has, dependencies, but everybody be on board. Having the right people at the right time. Um, Key members of the project team, do they have the time that's required? You know, and are they spread too thin across other projects day to day? You know, do they have other real jobs? You know, again, sort of the expectation, you know, hey, if we want to move fast and get live in, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, well, we can't be waiting on each other for, responses or for work to be done. Again, it's an expectation thing. If people understand those expectations, then we can plan to them, as opposed to, well, I thought we were going to be done in 2 days with integration. Well, not really happening, because there's other priorities. For the people part, I would say it's really important to have a functional leader as your super user. Having super users involved in the implementation is very important, and picking the right people. You know, people often ask, well, what is a super user and what should I look for in a super user? You need somebody who, frankly, is a good problem solver, knows the business from the customer side, but is also invested in learning the software. And also is somebody that is I'll call a quote unquote, a leader type person, where people from, on the customer side, they know that they can go to that person, and that person is ready, willing, and able to take on that leadership role of, sort of leading that group of people that they're responsible for. So like if you have a super user who's a planner, someone who can, lead that planning group and sort of, be able to explain things, train new people who are coming in, on how to do the job and why things are going there. And just one last thing on the super user, I think it's also important to have sort of a super user in training, in case something ever happens where, your super user's out, super users, is a fantastic person, gets promoted, they're gone, now what, right? We're not just, everything comes to a screeching halt and nobody knows what's going on because that one person who knew everything, is now gone. Teamwork, having good project management on both sides, open, honest, timely communication with each other, and frankly, not that everybody has to be buddy and, go out for dinner and beers every night during the project, but the projects that I've seen that are successful, there tends to be, a sense of camaraderie within that team, from the vendor side, as well as the customer side. There's a spirit of working together. They understand that there's no fear of coming to each other with, hey, we've got this problem that we just discovered, let's work together to find a solution, as opposed to, man, if I bring this up, we're going to get yelled at, or something like that. Again, realizing that, we're both on the same side and we're both trying to achieve success. So those are, at a high level, just some of the things I've seen over my many years, and gray hair development of projects that tend to go better than others. What are some of the key things that seem to be a common thread running throughout them?
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the super user piece. I know we did an episode or guest commentary here.
Right.
I think it was JP, your colleague JP, that
Right.
we talked about that. And I think that's a great point in terms of having such a person involved in the implementation. I think the last point you made as well, in terms of the teamwork aspect of it, I think is very critical. One of the things that I hear a lot, particularly from the vendor side, when they talk about difficult implementations, is that in some cases the customers kind of say, okay, Mr. Vendor or Mr. Consultant, go ahead and implement, and it's almost like this assumption that give us a call when it's all done and ready, right? And not realizing that they do, the customer, right, the shipper, whoever's implementing the TMS, also has a responsibility to invest resources, the right resources, whether it's a super user or the IT resources or the other stakeholders, but they have to invest time and resources and folks onto the team to make sure that this is successful. It's not the type of thing that it's like, they sign the contract and then it's, they go on with their daily work and then wait till the switch goes on, because that really, sets themselves up for, failure, because they haven't been involved all along and addressing the unexpected, as you talked about before, or, develop that camaraderie between the teams to really, address whatever issues or opportunities come up along the way.
Right.
You've already, I think you probably, pull out some of these things already from the comments that have been made. So, I mean, what ultimately defines, a successful, TMS implementation? And when you look at, those companies that you say, gosh, these people do it right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are some of the most common, threads or recipe for success?
I think, success can be defined, in many ways. But I think, if you're asking the question, when you get to go live, what is the definition of success, right? Just because somebody can, check a box and say, hey, customer went live, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is successful. To me, success, does not end at go live. Success is a continuation, and sort of honestly what happens as much after go live as during the implementation, right? I've seen customers that go live and then they run into problems for one reason or another, and it just becomes extremely difficult, or they'll stop using the software, or we have to come in and redo a bunch of stuff that was done. That's a whole nother episode, right? Of how you get to that point. But success is post go live to me, right? How much are you getting out of the software? Is it improving how you are doing things? Are you able to do things either that you weren't able to do before, or you're able to do them better? One of the things I wrote down is that, at go live, the project may end, but the relationship with that customer does not. That's sort of the starting point. What does that mean? Again, what does successful and post go live success look like? I think it's important to have some type of quote unquote account management. What does that mean? It can mean different things to different customers, depending upon their size and scope, but it's in some form or fashion keeping in touch with the customer, right? It's not, okay, go live, here you go, we're transitioning to port, or transitioning you to support, and you never hear from them again, right? It's keeping in touch. Hey, how are things going? Are there things that you are running into that are making it are there issues? Is it harder to do something that you originally thought? You can do all the UAT that you want, but when you get into month 2 of go live, there's often things that you're running into that you hadn't thought of or that have come up. Again, staying in touch, right? And to making sure that the customer is happy, not just on day 1 of go live, but on day 91, right? Post go live, things always change, right? People change, business processes change. People who were there may be gone in a year, 6 months, right? Just because of the the nature of churn, during in the workforce. New business opportunities come up. You have different customers come on board that may have had different requirements and different ways of doing business than you were doing at go live. Again, keeping in touch with the customer. Hey, how can we help you? How do we need to come in and sort of say, how do we incorporate your new business or your new customers into there? Again, staying in touch. Doing some kind of software or on-site analysis of, hey, it's been a year, how are things going? Our software, anybody's software changes from year to year. Our software right now is much different than it was at this time last year. Are there new functionalities in that software that can improve what you're doing, right? Even if nothing else has changed. Again, this, and I don't want to sound like this is some kind of I won't say bait and switch, but some kind of hidden agenda to upsell on more and more. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure that the customer is happy and that the software is continuing to provide ROI and benefit to them. And again, like I said before, the post go live, it's really just mentioning again the super user and the super user in training, because like I said, it's often that we'll see a super user who was there during go live, and a year later has moved on or moved to a different department, and just making sure that you're continually training and keeping somebody in that role up to speed in order to be able to have the customer, on the customer side, being able to continue and, not drop off in productivity or knowledge. And the last one on that, I'd say, just to help with that, is also to make sure that there is some kind of documentation on what is being done, right? Again, don't fall into the trap of my super user has all this tribal knowledge in their head, and they change jobs, they go on vacation for 2 weeks, and everybody struggles to understand what they're supposed to be doing. So I think documentation is key as well.
Yeah, no, a lot of great points. I love that comment where at go live, the project ends, but the relationship really begins at that point. And what I always tell folks is that TMS is a living, breathing entity.
Right.
And it's like a car, right? You have to continuously maintain it.
Yep.
And because your supply chain networks, your transportation networks are changing, like you mentioned, you might be now servicing new customers. You're going out for a procurement bid, and now you're getting new carriers, new rates in there. Yeah, your constraints might be changing. And I think to me, when I think about it, it's really an ongoing relationship that needs to happen between the technology provider and the company. And in many ways, that should be one of the components when they're evaluating. Go beyond the features and functions, really, and really think about is this a company that we can work with that's going to be a partner for us? Because we know that in order to get ongoing value from this solution, we're going to need to continue to adapt and change as our business changes, and we're going to need to work with our partners if there's changes or new functionality or capabilities that we need, from the technology side. So it really is truly a partnership there. So I think you touched on what was going to be one of my questions. So I'm just going to go, just because in the interest of time, I'm just going to go right to my last question here. As a way to wrap up, I mean, for companies that are just getting ready to implement a TMS for the first time, or they're replacing a proprietary or outdated system. I mean, what questions should they ask themselves to assess whether they are setting themselves up for failure or setting themselves up for ongoing success?
Right. And I love the way you use the word partner, because that's actually what I have written down, is look for somebody who truly is interested in being a partner with you. Partners make you successful. Again, like I said, not just some kind of methodology. Look at how they're going to treat you, in total as a partner, and look, does that company operate themselves in a partner type relationship? Does their sales and service and support organizations appear to you, to operate as a partnership? Is there that type of culture that's within the company? You often, you don't want to hear it's not my problem type of thing, right? If sales, if services gets into the implementation and they run into something, and, they ask sales, and sales says, well, not my problem, it's your problem now, right? Or same thing with support, right? Support comes to implementation services and says, hey, well, sorry, that's your problem now, it's support. So just look for that type of culture. Again, honesty and accountability. I think you can sort of pick that up. Are people telling you one thing just to try to get you to believe it, or are they open and honest about what they're trying to tell you that they can do as a company, as a piece of software? I also say, it does help for TMS or anybody who's doing implementation. Look for people that have the experience across companies, across software, across industries, and sort of have that been there, done that type of thing, and can advise you sort of the pitfalls, or things to watch out for, during implementation. Not that necessarily, an idea is, good or bad, but, say, hey, if this is what you're thinking about doing, you also need to be aware of A, B, and C, right? So, experience is, invaluable, from an implementation. And I'd say just a company that is highly focused on customer success, long term, and customer satisfaction, right? Are are they just looking to check a box of, yes, I did this task, yes, I did that task, okay, now I'm done? Again, getting back to the long-term relationship and long-term investment in the success of your company and your operations, not just, hey, I want to get this done, hey, I want to get go live done, and then move on to something else. So long-term success, and look for that type of commitment.
Excellent, excellent points. I mean, I mean, to me, it kind of, if I had to distill it down, it comes down to what we talk about so much in supply chain logistics. It comes down to clear and honest communication between all the parties, and effective collaboration between not only the internal stakeholders but between the parties as well. And I think if you have those two things, good communication, good collaboration, you're really setting yourself up for success moving forward. Well, Terry, as I always say, we always just manage to scratch the topic, the surface on these topics. But I think we provided some good, food for thought and advice for folks, that are thinking about implementing a TMS or heading down that path. So again, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
No, awesome. I appreciate the chance to talk with you, Adrian, and look forward to maybe doing something again in the future. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all who joined us today. If you are watching this episode on demand on the 3G TMS website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or comment for Terry, you can post it there, and I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.